Numerous U.S. government officials reported experiencing odd symptoms and indicators between December 30, 2016 and February 9, 2017. At least 2 of them suffered consequences, as well as the agency dispatched reinforcements to Havana. Every victim spoke of having pressure waves pelting their heads. The disease quickly spread to additional spies and embassy personnel in nations including Germany, Austria, and the United States of America. While some choose to overlook this truth, one guy was able to provide scientific proof of the attack and, subsequently, of the assassination of a prominent American woman. This would mark the start of the investigation into Ivana Trump's murder and the Havana syndrome. Through a series of occurrences, Igor Zijan finds recurring events that take place on July 14th of every year. It all began on July 14, 2017, when an anonymous applicant applied to the Swiss Rich Dad coaching program. In that same year, Igor Zijan monitored the spread of Havana syndrome activities and carried out his earlier studies with an emphasis on development and research. Simultaneously, reports of purported assaults on U.S. intelligence officers were received from Moscow, Russia, Tbilisi, Poland, Georgia, Taiwan, and Australia. Other reports came from Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, Colombia, and Austria. Soon, the attack also spread to U.S. and Canadian embassies. In early 2018, Global Affairs Canada ended family postings to Cuba and recalled all staff with families. According to reports, the severity of the illnesses affecting some Canadians in 2017 prevented them from returning to work. It was challenging for the Royal Canadian Mounted Police to conduct an investigation into Havana syndrome in February 2019 due to the lack of knowledge regarding its cause. However, who stood to gain from the attack on Canadian and American diplomats on Cuban soil? And how did they go about doing this? Is this a brand new weapon that we haven't heard about before? National Academy of Sciences also weighed in on this matter. They referenced the leaked CDC report and suggested that the brain injuries were most likely the result of some form of directed energy device. As the investigations progressed, the Havana syndrome made its way to the White House. In 2019, one of the government officials was out for a stroll with her dog in a Washington suburb called Arlington. Her dog started convulsing, according to the account. Then she started to feel the same way, tingling on one side of her face, a sharp headache, and a high-pitched ringing in her ears. The other casualty, a member of the National Security Council, became ill unexpectedly close to the ellipse, the expansive oval lawn on the south side of the White House. They had an invisible opponent attacking them. Igor Zijan was looking into the attacks and was corresponding with the White House, the U.S. Attorney's Office in Washington, D.C., the International Criminal Court of the Netherlands, the Swiss Prosecutor's Office in ZUG, the Powers Tribunal in the United Kingdom, and general prosecutors in Germany, Australia, and other countries via email and messages. He started informing President Trump about the threat, quantifying the attack against him and his family, and providing scientific proof of the Havana syndrome attack. Igor Zijan generated a surge of information interchange through the intelligence agencies and media as he carried out his investigation and sent more than 9,000 emails and other messages, drawing attention to his project. He soon discovers other cases, including numerous prior attacks and additional symptoms like nosebleeds and eye bleeds, among many more. Ambassador Stossel provided an exceptionally fascinating report about his illness, which included an eye hemorrhage as one of his symptoms. When U.S. Secretary of State Henry Kissinger linked Stossel's illness to microwaves, in a now classified 1975 phone call with the Soviet ambassador in Washington, he confessed that we are trying to keep the thing quiet. This was presented in the CNN article Havana Syndrome and the Mystery of the Microwaves, published on 9 September 2021. Igor Zijan's research led him to identify unique patterns occurring on July 14, 2017, a particular date. After looking into the incident and verifying the information, Igor discovers the following information on July 14, 2023. What Igor finds is shocking. The events are as follows each year by exactly the same person on exactly the same date, while the same person was working on the Havana Syndrome research. Beginning on July 14, 2017, he discovered that the same person applied to Rich Dad coaching in Switzerland. This was the first instance of this series of occurrences. Looking back a year on July 14, 2018, that very same person moved to Twin Towers Zilmatweg in Luzern to continue his investigation of Havana Syndrome activity, not understanding the significance of them in the events that followed. He had not planned on moving there. A year later, on July 14, 2019, a day that was not by chance, he traveled to Washington, D.C., facing incredible difficulties. He was unable to get lodging because of technical problems. Thus, his original intention was modified, and on that very day, he went to the USA Corp Museum. On July 14, 2020, we continued the measurement in London, UK. On exactly this day, he finds something shocking and something extremely important. He immediately reports to the President of the EU Commission and to the International Criminal Court in Netherlands about the first ever detected Havana Syndrome radio field, a microfield on the top of the stairs, whose characteristics match the direct impact on body stability and muscle reflexes. This was the first attack measured on the stairs. Radio field signals from the satellite and wireless environment overwrote and disrupted muscle reactions. Such an attack could only indicate that there was a murderous attempt. There is only one possible conclusion when muscles lose their response and feeling at the top of the steps. This entails tumbling down the steps, where you very likely risk breaking your neck or causing significant harm to yourself. It made a very apparent difference, the onslaught being so deadly. This same person took a photo of the steps where the measurement was taken on July 14, 2020 at 9:43:15 a.m. This image was included in the same email that was given to the International Criminal Court in the Netherlands, alerting them to the threat posed by this particular attack on the stairs, which has features that prevent a person's reflexes from activating and their inability to respond to muscle action. The person received no response. Rather than sending the police and forensic experts to verify the specifics of this person's work, the European Commission President at the time, Sassoli, was addressing concerns about our work through the ministry in Great Britain. Instead, they were sending individuals from hospitals and mental institutions. They did not respond, particularly when it was conveyed to them that Igor Zijan was working on research. According to the scientific investigation on July 14, 2021, this same person had a phone conversation with ZUG, Switzerland's prosecutor. During the nearly 5 years of the inquiry, this was the only discussion on the application of the testing to the prosecutor. The ZUG Switzerland prosecutor permitted the measurement evidence to be delivered to them over a secure email provider. Igor Zijan believed that he would now put an end to the research and prosecution would start. Finally, in October 2021, the Havana Syndrome Act was approved. Senators Collins and Shaheen were monitoring the situation, and Mr. Biden supported Igor Zijan's proposal. To get the legislation enacted up until that time, he had to send almost 9,000 emails and texts to the White House, media, international courts, and prosecutors. Continuing his work, this anonymous person was flying to Israel. Without realizing this was happening on the almost same day as other events, his return flight to Great Britain was booked on July 13, 2022. However, something changed again. His flight was delayed this evening, and it was delayed for a very long time. Unfortunately, the flight was rescheduled to a different platform, and he was unaware of it until he saw it on the screen of the flight in the Israel airport hallway. On July 13, late at night, he failed to board the aircraft. He was running late, arriving at the gates just before midnight. Gates closed a few minutes before, and he missed the flight. He was waiting at the airport for another aircraft, but it was delayed for 4 days as he was facing technical issues. Unimaginably, on the same day, Igor Zijan, founder and CEO of the company System of All, launched our appreciated token, SALL. We were facing several delays, and finally, we succeeded in launching the token on exactly July 14, 2022 at 10:03 a.m. Ivana Trump was pronounced dead that the same July 14 morning following her fall down the stairs. A few days later, he received the news, and he began informing the Trump family repeatedly that he could provide evidence of her murder. Without comprehending at the time the sequence of events leading up to this particular date, he was making connections between this and the measurement on the stairs as well as some other observations. He was unaware of the series of events that would transpire on this particular date, July 14, 2017-2023. He kept writing to the Trump family because, as he knew, the evidence he had gathered from his research, scientific measurements, and data proved Ivana Trump was murdered. On those, he was determined. He was greatly surprised to discover something incredible as a result of his additional investigation, an application to the ZUG Switzerland prosecution office. He found that the sequence of events began on this particular date, July 14th, and continued annually from 2017 to the present. No doubt the majority of Americans were wondering if it was an accident. Igor Zijan knew it wasn't. He could prove it, but the harm was already done. Ears were closed as the White House shifted over the thousands of letters he had sent because of the measures. Some intelligence employees wanted to keep Igor Zijan and the Trump family apart, regardless of the cost. However, they knew since Igor Zijan had informed many about the murder and other incidents, they were observed from everywhere. Over 12,000 emails and messages have been issued globally to impose legislation and prosecution since the research and development began in 2016-2017 and continues to this day, October 2023, all from the efforts of a single man. He was putting a lot of effort into promoting justice and a high standard of living for all Americans, including all other nations without exception. He established the existence of Havana Syndrome actions, and introduced legislation that is currently in effect safeguarding over 330 million Americans, including members of the CIA, NSA, and other government agencies. This time he proved as well that programming is part of our lives, which is still based on a simulation of mental diagnoses. The evidence you observe in the sequence of events is genuine. These are authentic records guaranteeing that the incidents actually occurred and were not staged. Igor Zijan not only altered the course of history, but he did it with such a degree of power that he remained the only person to be able to do so permanently, even after the administrations of Henry Kissinger and a number of other highly influential international leaders. In more than 70 years, there were more than several hundred million people hospitalized, as well as in mental institutes. They went through several hundred million clinical tests, being examined by several hundred million doctors. Not one of them ever proved the direct existence of neuroprogramming or human technological abuses, in the sense of simulating mental illnesses or even attempting to murder an individual. The world has to realize that analog technology is no longer isolating us, and that we actually live in a digital world with computers, thousands of satellites, wireless gadgets, and numerous networks all surrounding us. Because he thought this shift was essential, his work reshaped the course of history forever. Of course, not without issues. He provided the most significant evidence, almost impossible to get, evidence proving that one of the most well-liked and prosperous American women, Ivana Trump, was killed. Her assassination is compared to the level of assassination of John F. Kennedy, but it was much more difficult to prove it. The high-level assassinations of White House family members are rare, and they do concern the most classified agendas if her murder was planned. The technology used was unknown, making people believe she had died in the accident. The degree of danger proving her assassination was the highest, as creating and publishing this documentary movie placed it as the most difficult and risk-taking assassination ever proved. We can be thankful to Igor Zijan. He risked his life, reputation, and time to prove what the entire world believed: it did not exist. He switched the system and brought a law to the front end. Troubles he faced were unimaginable, including extortion from the governments demanding that he resign from the project. As expected from the ex-Yugoslavian government, where Igor Zijan was born, in Slovenia, the aggression and approach were not only similar but the same as the one from the war in Balkan. Still, if Igor Zijan would give up, if he would sell those licenses and evidence before he proved Ivana Trump was murdered, he knew the truth would be always buried. Ivana Trump would never reach justice, and her family would never know. To show our gratitude, we will commemorate Ivana Trump by donating 10% of the video's streaming revenue to kids with developmental and mental health issues. It was a long distance off. Hundreds of victims, including Ivana Trump, perished. Justice can now be served. She's sadly no longer with us. How then can we stop this? The saga of the mystery attacks is now concluded, and we have successfully surpassed the resources and knowledge that were accessible prior to 2017. After successfully implementing laws, we are now discussing the advent of the digital era in the world. We are making progress on a number of fronts, such as our initiative to draft a new treaty with the UN, our meticulous tracking of microfield, radio field, and other human-machine interface technologies, and our explicit addressing and guidance of new demands for the legal system and punishment process. Although its use has many benefits, we nevertheless need to regulate its use, particularly in the countries that triggered this global disaster, especially because they were also abusing it for child pornography and rape. Assuming that both allies and members of NATO adhere to its regulations, what specific misstep occurred? Therefore, what precisely is going on? How do those stories relate to one another, and what was going on beforehand? Regarding the motivations and construction of the Havana syndrome attacks, what are psychology reports indicating about the behaviors of scientists and intelligence employees? Along with further revelations regarding Ivana Trump's death, join us as we solve the mystery surrounding her death in the documentary film System of All and Havana Syndrome. If you thought that was surprising, we have a lot more. We are working on an extended version of the documentary film, which will expose a great deal more and leave you in disbelief at the specifics. Please subscribe so that we can share it with you.